Hi guys, it's Miss Meyer with another episode of the Miss Meyer Show. So, we're talking about Chapter 10, Part 2. Yes. No. Oh, goodness gracious. We're talking about Chapter 10, Part 3. No! Jennifer! I'm talking to myself here. Chapter 10, Part 2. I'm getting so totally confused, and I'm very apologetic. Mea culpa, mea culpa. That means my fault. So, I still got a little bit of the lingering cough, but overall, I think I'm better-ish. So, there shouldn't be too much nose blowing, sneezing, or coughing in this video. There may be some, but nowhere near as much as there were before. All right. So, this is Chapter 10, Part 2, excuse me, and it's starting on page 364, and it's going to go all the way to... I mean, I put on there, like, read to this page, but I'm not really asking you too many questions about anything on 370 or 371, but I still want you to read that. So it's going to be from 364 all the way to 371. Okay, so let's get started. Now, we talked about Uncle Earl, right? We talked about the post-World War II economy. We talked about Louisiana after World War II. We talked about consumerism, the growth of the neighborhoods, things like that. All those kind of things we talked in class. Now we're going to talk about the beginning of the civil rights movement, the most recent civil rights. Well, no, excuse me. It says the modern civil rights movement, but we're talking about the one in the 60s and the 50s. Now, the reason that this civil rights movement was so huge was because it was, for the first time, you had so many people that were participating, so many people that were tired of it and saying, and brave enough to say, hey, can't continue. This has got to change. And the reason that was primarily was because after World War II, you know, these men and women had come back to America, and African-American soldiers and African-American men and women did not have the same opportunities that everybody else had, that white servicemen had, and white women and white men. There was still segregation going on. They were still forced to live in, you know, different neighborhoods, go to different schools, different facilities. All that was still happening. So even though the war had ended, and in this war, you know, they were fighting side by side. Yes, there were segregated units, but they were, you know, they were equally as brave as anybody else. Rather, if you were an African-American soldier or a white soldier or an Asian American or Native American, everybody was pulled together to fight the Nazis. So when the African-American soldiers came back to America, they saw that things kind of weren't that different. You know, they kind of expected things to be much more inclusive, like everybody working together, because that's what was going on during wartime. But that was not the case. There was still lots and lots and lots of segregation. Also, some of the benefits and things that the white soldiers were receiving, as far as like pensions, housing, things like that they received because they were veterans, the African-American veterans did not receive that, or they received much less than what their white service counterparts were. So there was a lot of discrepancy, and it really, really was terrible because, you know, everybody risked their lives. It didn't matter. So when this was happening, you start to see so many people start to just pay attention. And it wasn't just the African-American community that was paying attention. There were people that were joining this, you know, protest, the civil rights movement. They had, you know, white people, they had Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, women, African Americans, everybody. There were all kinds of people who were joining this fight for this movement because they saw that this was just not fair. This was not right. It was not right the way that we were treating our own soldiers. I mean, we went over and fought this war to end tyranny, to end, you know, Hitler trying to exterminate a whole genocide thing going on with a whole race of people. And now we're going to continue to segregate? It doesn't make any sense. We're fighting a war against, I guess inhumane, just, I don't know, just removal of, I don't know, ideology. That was Hitler's ideology, that one race was superior. And then we're going to come back here in America, we're fighting that. And in America, we're still going to segregate based on race? It didn't make much sense. Really, it didn't. So a lot of people started to really speak up about this. And like I said, it wasn't just the African American community, it was all kinds of people. Now, one of the things that really came about with this civil rights movement was influential leaders. And we talk about them all the time. We know about them big time. You know, this is when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came around. This is when we start to see Malcolm X was at this time. We had... who else? Thurgood Marshall, we have Rosa Parks, all of the big civil rights names. This is when they start kind of getting out there and pushing and just really, you know, fighting for equality and fighting against injustice. So the NAACP, and we still have the NAACP, but it was during this time that the NAACP was formed. Now, the NAACP stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Now, the NAACP, they were a legal team. They were a legal defense fund because obviously African Americans, especially in the South, the Deep South, were not getting a fair trial as far as, you know, their white neighbors. They just weren't. So the NAACP was a legal defense fund to supply to legally aid, anyone or any person really that was arrested because of civil rights violation or things like that. So the NAACP had lawyers. It was led by future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. So Thurgood Marshall was one of the lawyers here. Eventually, though, he was named to the Supreme Court of the United States. So the Legal Defense Fund with the NAACP, they would represent individuals who were, you know, sued or arrested or suing or something like that based on civil rights. So like when Rosa Parks was arrested for the, you know, not giving up her seat, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund was there to push that. When Brown versus Board of Education was going up against the Supreme Court and it was going all these district courts, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, they were the ones that were there. These were very, very, very intelligent, smart lawyers who were there to defend any person that's coming up against a civil rights case. A lot of times there were not a lot of lawyers to represent African Americans, and there definitely weren't a lot of white lawyers in the Deep South that were willing to do that either. So the NAACP Legal Defense Fund provided the people that were going against with these civil rights cases, not only lawyers, but good lawyers who could really argue the case and knew what they were talking about. Thurgood Marshall, he was one of them. And Thurgood Marshall, like I remember him being on the Supreme Court. But you know, I'm special. I love all history stuff. He's not on it anymore, but is he on it anymore? No, that's Clarence Thomas. That's what I'm thinking of. I don't know. There's a lot of new people on the Supreme Court. So anyway, sorry. Now the point of the whole Civil Defense Fund and the point of the lawyers and all of the things that were going on, especially the civil rights cases, was to really end segregation, because that was the big thing. Segregation, because like I just said, it was pointless. Because you think about, we're going over there to fight in World War II. We're going to fight Hitler. We're fighting because he wants to think, you know, or he's trying to make the Germans the master race above all other people. But then we're kind of, you know, back here in America, we're saying, oh, we're going to segregate based on race, which kind of silly. I mean, not just silly, it was just, it made no point. Like, what are we fighting for if we're going to do this back at home? So the whole Legal Defense Fund, the purpose of it, and one of the huge purposes with the whole civil rights movement was to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, to get rid of separate but equal. Remember, Plessy versus Ferguson was a Supreme Court case that upheld that segregation was okay unless you had it said that segregation was okay as long as you had two equal things. But we obviously knew that that was not happening. There was not any equality really going on. One was always going to be a little bit better than the other one. And so the Legal Defense Fund, the NAACP, their goal, their operative, was to challenge that ruling to get it overturned so that segregation would no longer be a thing, really. Okay? So in Louisiana, we had our own, ally in the Legal Defense Fund with the NAACP, and his name is Alexander Pierre Ternal, and he called him AP Ternal. Now he led the charge in Louisiana to end segregation, and he did that in small increments, like little steps. Lots of times, for me, I feel like I have like a piece of hair or something, like cat hair on my nose. It's driving me crazy. Like if I know that I've got a huge task to do, like I have a dissertation to write, which is this huge, big paper. It's like a book, really. And I have to write it to get my doctorates because I'm almost Dr. Meyer. So how I do it is I break it down to the little sections and I write down every day a little bit thing. Okay, do this, do that, because it makes it easier to attain. So AP Ternard was pretty much doing the same thing. He knew that he had a really big task at hand, and that was to challenge segregation here in Louisiana, to stop it. So he instituted a plan that was kind of like step by step by step. That way it wasn't some huge massive thing that they had to complete, it was just thrown at people saying, we're going to do this. It was step by step by step. Because if you do it that way, you're more likely to complete and reach your goal, because, a big giant plan all in one huge piece is going to be overwhelming. And it was really, really good that he did this. And in fact, because of a lot of his initiatives and the way that he was pushing forward this, step-by-step plan to end segregation, it made it able for Southern Louisiana Institute, that's SLI, okay? SLI, he made it, that school, to be the first previous all-white college in the Deep South, it's here in Louisiana, to end segregation. Really, he did it. So it was because of his efforts, and I think it was really intelligent of him to do it in small baby steps, because those little baby steps made it much easier for it to happen. Really made it much more of a possibility. Now, here Earl Long, sorry, I've itched my neck. Earl Long now is gone. Right? He's so no longer, no more Earl, no more Longs. We're tired of that. We want a whole new situation, a whole new thing happening here in Louisiana. And we talked about why Earl Long was kind of, his whole thing was not so great, especially after the war. And people were kind of like, we don't think so. Especially after he raised people's taxes 50%. He really didn't make any friends by doing that. Well, in 1952, the new governor of Louisiana was Robert Keenan. Now, Robert Keenan was very different from Earl Long in the fact that he was a rule follower. He pushed forward the lower taxes. He increased pay raises somewhat. He really tried to focus on earning money for the state with the offshore drilling. He really wanted to kind of really put in place kind of like a good reputation for Louisiana, because, Huey Long, the whole world knew Huey Long was all, they said he was corrupt, which he was, and they said he was, his whole plan was terrible plan, socialist, whatever. Then we have Earl Long, who's literally committed to a mental institution. So Louisiana's governors don't really have a fabulous reputation. They're getting worse and worse. I mean, they kind of recovered a little bit with Jimmy Davis, and then, then what happened with Earl kind of really just dug us deep into a giant hole, because people were saying, Louisiana, their governor's a lunatic, So Robert Keenan, when he came into office, he really wanted to make Louisiana known for straightforward politics, for caring about its people, and for being honest in government. And that's how he really, that's the reputation that he had. He was totally different from Earl. He wasn't going to go hand out toilet seats or hams door to door. He wasn't going to do that. But he was going to make sure that things happened on the up and up, and that Louisiana was, not as corrupt, or not known for its corruption like it was. Okay? Now, let's go back to what's going on with the NAACP. Now, remember, we just said the NAACP, their whole platform was to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, to get rid of this whole segregation thing. And the Supreme Court, this case, the case constantly, like I said, I'm not making sense. Thurgood Marshall was the one in charge, and the only kind of cases that they really focused on were the civil rights cases. Well, there was a case that was brought to the Legal Defense Fund for the NAACP, and it was a little girl. Her name was Linda Brown, and her parents, and they said that, you know, they had two schools. They had one school that was really close to their house, but it was the white school, so she couldn't go to that school. The black school was across the railroad tracks, and it was a long distance away, and it was dangerous. And so they said, it's not fair that I've got to send my little girl to this other school that's not safe. I've got to put her in a, you know, crossing train tracks. It's just not good. It's not fair that I've got to do that just because of the color of her skin. And so this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, this is important for you guys to remember. I've told you this before, but I'm just going to keep telling you until you're tired of hearing it. The Supreme Court does not hear criminal cases. They will never hear a murder trial. They will never hear a robbery case or, divorce case or child. They will not hear anything like that. The only cases that go before the Supreme Court are cases that have to deal with the United States Constitution. So Thurgood Marshall and the Legal Defense Fund, or team, is it fund or team? I can't remember. Yeah, it's Legal Defense Fund. The Legal Defense Fund brought this case to the Supreme Court and said that it is unconstitutional for the United States to segregate people based on race. That's what they said. So the Supreme Court heard this argument, and Thurgood Marshall was the head person there. He was like the leader of it all. So what happened was, eventually, they heard the case, and I'm telling you, these lawyers were not just basic lawyers. These were good lawyers that knew what they were doing. And unanimously, that means everybody, all of the Supreme Court justices who were white, all of them, they decided Thurgood Marshall was right. They said that separate but equal was unconstitutional. And their actual ruling said separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, meaning they can't be equal because they couldn't. I mean, I showed you the thing when I had the two different makeups, if you saw that. They said that he was right. Thurgood Marshall had a fabulous argument, and he was right. And so it overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. Segregation was no longer legal. However, this is how they did it. This is where it gets tricky. They said that that segregation had to end with all deliberate speed. That was the wording that they used. Now, you had some places, some states, like Arkansas was one, Mississippi another one, even in the places in Louisiana that said, okay, well, they interpreted all deliberate speed however they wanted. Basically, because by saying and not giving a clear timeline, like you have to have segregation finished by 6 months from tomorrow, whatever. By saying just all deliberate speed, it basically said whenever you can get around to doing it, basically. So you had places like Arkansas, like Mississippi, you had some places like Louisiana that were saying, oh, well, yeah, we're going to end segregation. Of course we are. As soon as we have all that deliberate speed and when we're ready to do it. We're working on it, though. We're going to get there. In all reality, it was just like dragging their feet. They were never, ever going to get there. They were going to really use that because it wasn't specifically saying this needs to happen during this time period. Now, this really, what was a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal. Ending segregation was a huge deal as far as the Supreme Court. But it didn't, like I said, it didn't give a specific time frame when segregation should end. And it only kind of, it was just, it should have been much more specific, okay? So because of this, you had a lot of people and that were saying, okay, then if this is not going to happen anytime soon, then we're going to have to do something to try and get this to happen. Well, they said that they would go to the streets in direct action is what they called it. And these were efforts to promote further change, like to to say, like, okay, the Supreme Court saying it's unconstitutional. We need to get this, we need to be on the same page here. So the thing, though, that really, really made this direct action so just a big thing was the way that the protests were done. Now, one of the leaders of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and that's called SCLC, and I can't remember how my professor in college used to say it. She knew exactly how to say that acronym. Well, I don't even know. I can't say it, but she did. I don't know. But so that, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, this was a group who was kind of, trying to really bring about change by saying that we should be nonviolent protesters, by saying that if we are nonviolent, if we're going to sit there and we're just going to protest, peacefully protest, and, the people that are against us are going to take extreme actions, that's going to be that is way overboard, that's going to make more of a statement. So this is when you start to see protesters like sitting at the lunch counters. They're just sitting there, and people are screaming at them and throwing things at them and spitting on them and not pulling them down, and they don't do anything. And then they're arrested. And so when people start looking at this and they're saying, why are they acting like this? These people aren't doing anything. It really pushes. It lets it be out there. It brings it to people's attention. Remember, people don't really necessarily want to focus on things that upset them. And what upsets them is when you've got people that are literally just sitting there and they are being accosted like crazy because of the color of their skin. And so when this is happening, you see lots of people, lots of newspapers, lots of journalists, they're coming down, they're printing this stuff, they're putting it in the newspaper, they're putting it on the radio, they're putting it in TV, they're putting it on all these things, and you're forced to see what's going on. And this is an inequality. You see what's happening. So before, especially up north, where, there was still racism up north, definitely, but it wasn't like it was down south. You had so many people that kind of just were able to say, oh, well, that's down south, that's in the south, or whatever. But once these nonviolent protesters started, getting the attention of the United States media, everybody was paying attention. And when everyone started paying attention, everyone started getting involved. And that's when segregation really started to dissolve and end. Okay? Now, the Montgomery bus boycott was another thing about segregation. There was a rule that said, if you were African American, you had to sit in the back of the bus. Now, when I was in school, only the cool kids sat in the back of the bus, and that's why I sat in the front, because I wasn't a cool kid. But really, that was the thing. Like, oh, you gotta sit in the back of the bus if you are an African American. Now, if the bus becomes so full that you have white patrons that are coming on the bus and they need to go to the back of the bus, then you, as an African American person, have to give up your seat for them. Well, the whole thing with the Montgomery bus boycott with Rosa Parks, it was that she had refused to give up her seat. And when she did, the bus stopped. She just sat there. A peaceful protester. She didn't do anything. They started throwing things at her, spitting on her, trying to grab her and throw her out the seat. And eventually she was arrested. And the whole world took notice. The whole world. And all these actions. You're looking at this woman who's being arrested, being really hurt, just abused. And she's just sitting there. That's all she's doing. She's just sitting there. She's not fighting back. She is just sitting there. Now, I don't know about y'all, but for me, I couldn't do that without reacting. I would react. I can't imagine the strength that she had to just sit there and take all of that. Well, little do many people know that the Montgomery bus boycott was not the first bus boycott. The Montgomery bus boycott actually happened because of a previous bus boycott that had happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We were the first, and there was a smaller scale, of course, but what we had done in our Baton Rouge bus boycott kind of gave, said, okay, this can happen in Baton Rouge, we're going to make it even bigger. it's going to be a bigger bus boycott that we're going to do in Montgomery. So Baton Rouge bus boycott was the blueprint for the Montgomery bus boycott. So now we have, it's obvious, okay? So now because we've gotten national media attention and everybody is aware of what's going on as far as the civil rights movement, you're going to have pushback because you have everybody's watching. Everybody is focused on this. Everybody. And so you have people that are very upset about the Supreme Court's decision to desegregate, people that are very upset about the bus boycott and upset about Dr. King. They're upset about all these things. And so they're going to push back. We learned last week's Miss Myers show about the Dixiecrats. Their whole political platform was to continue segregation. So you had lots of people that were very angry about this and that they wanted this to end. They're like, we do not like what's going on. We don't like the direction that this is heading. And they really, they really pushed back with a lot of the civil rights movement. Now they called their plan massive resistance, basically, and they came up with a manifesto, which is basically like a mission statement. And their manifesto said that the Brown decision was awful. It was, that's wrong. There was tampering involved, all this other kind of conspiracy stuff. And they said that the decision as in and of itself to end segregation was a dangerous attack on the powers of the states and encouraged the use of every lawful means to resist its implementation. So their manifesto, the massive resistance, their mission is telling people, spreading the news out there and saying, you need to resist any attempts at desegregation. That's what they were saying. That was their whole mission. And he had a lot of people that were joining this thing and listening to it because there's so much fear-mongering going on, so much falsehoods and things like that. You had people that were saying, oh, well, if we don't fight segregation, it's going to get worse. They're going to do this and they're going to do that. And so people, it was just insane. And that was this whole issue that was going on. And the reason that people were literally just kind of like fear-mongering was what's going on with the Cold War too. So the Cold War is happening at the same time that the whole civil rights movement is going on. So everybody's all amped up and afraid anyway. So you had people that were part of the massive resistance that were playing upon the fears of people anyway because of the Cold War. Now, this is what the Cold War is, okay? The Cold War was a war between Russia and the United States, but it's not an actual war. Remember, Russia and the United States, they were allies in World War II. They fought against Germany together, but we were always leery about the Russians because we knew initially they were kind of allies with Germany. Said basically, don't mess with us, we will mess with you. Well, Germany messed with them, so they said, okay, we're going to mess with you. Well, once the war was over, there was a lot of distrust, especially between the United States and United States and Russia, because Russia was communist. And America was a democratic nation where consumerism was huge. And Russia was a communist country. So there was a lot of anger, a lot of distrust. They didn't trust each other. So they started to say, well, we're going to go into a war. I've got missiles pointed at you, America. And America said, well, I got missiles pointed at you, Russia. And it was like a verbal kind of back and forth. There was never a battle. There was never a gunshot fired. There was never troops feet on the ground. The Cold War was each person trying to scare the bejeebies out of the other person. And they did a really good job, because Russia was saying that they had a nuclear bomb. Because remember, we saw what a nuclear bomb, the damage it could do when we dropped it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So Russia was saying that they had a nuclear bomb and it was in Cuba and they were going to fire it over at America, like right into us. So we saw what the nuclear weapon, the atomic bomb, had done to Japan. So when Russia tells us that they've got one and they're pointing it right at us, we're going to get scared. And this wasn't just like hush, hush, on the government telephone. It was everywhere. It leaked out. So everybody is afraid. They are literally afraid of immediate annihilation. It was like gone. And so on top of that, on top of these fears of Russia coming to kill us with their weapons in the Cold War, you had people that were playing on the fears, saying that the African American community was part of it somehow, and they were going to do this. So you had all this fear mongering that was totally not true. Now, Russia, we did have to be on our guard. We had to say, like, okay, I don't know what's going on with Russia, but the African American community, come on. But they were playing on this. People were so ramped up in an excited state, and they were so nervous. It's like when you go to like a haunted house or something, which I never do, because for one, I just don't like them. I don't like being scared. I don't. But you know how like when you're watching a movie or you're going to a haunted house, probably watching a movie would be best, and you're listening to the music and it's like, I think that's Jason. You're getting automatically scared because the music's getting like, or think about Jaws, like, I don't even know how Jaws goes anymore. Golly, I'm old. I can't remember how Jaws goes. I don't really remember. But anyway, it's scary because it's raising your anticipation. And you're automatically like, because your anticipation is all the way up here. The same thing is going on with this. And especially with the massive resistance and how they're using the Cold War as to their advantage to scare a bunch of people and get them to push back against desegregation. So you had all these people that were so afraid what's going on. And so they were already just hyped up with lots of emotion. And, it was just it was a time of complete and utter mental craziness. Like people were really, really scared about what was going on, especially parents. And I'm going to include a video at the end of this Miss Myers show, and it's called Bert the Turtle. And what it is, it's a video that they would show school kids because they were so afraid that Russia was going to come and bomb and kill us all, that they created these videos to show to school kids, to tell them what to do in the event that the bomb comes. So that's the kind of atmosphere that they're living in. Continual fear. Every day being like, I don't know what's going to happen. Is today the day? Is today the day that it's going to happen? And unfortunately, some people, like the massive resistance people, were playing on that fear to kind of get their own way with desegregation. And that's unfortunately what was happening. Joseph McCarthy, he was a senator at this time. He was a seriously paranoid man. And I'm not giving him a leeway. I'm not going to say, oh, poor McCarthy, he was just scared. No, McCarthy was one of the people that really just got people even more afraid. Because he gets on TV, gets on the news, gets on the media, and he says, the Russians, the communists, not only do they have a bomb in Cuba placed at the United States, but they have infiltrated the highest levels of government in our society. They have spies in every neighborhood. You can't trust anybody. So this period of time in the civil rights movement, people started saying, like, I can't trust them. Are they really a communist? Are they a spy for Russia? And then you had people like the massive resistance, people saying, don't allow desegregation. If you allow desegregation, you're going to have communist people coming in. And the communists work for Russia. And Russia has atomic bombs that are going to come and kill you in your beds. So during the whole civil rights movement and the Cold War thrown in, you've got so much fear mongering, people afraid, trying to just live their lives and saying, oh my gosh, what's tomorrow going to bring? So eventually, this all spurs into something even bigger that we've got with JFK, the Bay of Pigs, with Cuba and Fidel Castro, but we're not going to really talk about that in Louisiana history, but that is something that's going to happen. I mean, all of these things are happening in the world, and Louisiana at the time, we are trying to desegregate. This is the time when Ruby Bridges that's which I personally think should replace Huey Long in Statuary Hall, comes on the scene, and we see people like the Little Rock Nine, the 9 students who went to desegregate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. You had all of these things that were happening amidst, well, I'm trying to say amidst, during, let's say during, okay? So all these things happening during this whole Cold War and McCarthyism scare. So the American people at this time are really dealing with a lot of mental anguish. There's no one fighting physically. I mean, well, in the Civil Rights Movement, yes, there is. But there's no war going on. Most of this is all psychological, and it is coming. So what I want you to take away from this is how psychologically some of the people were, all over the place, really. So that's all I've got for you. Make sure that you put your code word in class. We're probably going to go over probably more about the Little Rock Nine, and then we're going to talk about McCarthyism. We're going to talk about fear-mongering and psychological warfare, because that's pretty much what was going on. And that's about it. So I will see you guys in class. Have a wonderful week, and make sure that you watch this video after this. It's kind of sad that they were teaching these little kids this. So that's all I've got. Adios, bye.
Dum dum, diddle dum dum, diddle dum dum, diddle dum dum. There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered, ducked and covered.
He did what we all must learn to do. You
and you
and you
and you, duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. This is an official civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association. Produced by Archer Productions, Incorporated. Hey, Bert, come on out and meet all these nice people, please. Oh, all right. We really can't blame you. You see, Bert is a very, very careful fellow. When there's danger, this is the way he keeps from being hurt. Sometimes it even saves his life. That's why these children are practicing to duck and cover just as you do in your school. We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready for it, just as we are ready for many other dangers that are around us all the time. Fire is a danger. It can burn whole buildings if someone is careless. But we are ready for fires. We have a fine fire department to put out the fire, and you have fire drills in your school so you know what to do. Automobiles can be dangerous, too. They sometimes cause bad accidents, but we are ready. We have safety rules that car drivers and people who are walking must obey. Now, we must be ready for a new danger, the atomic bomb. First, you have to know what happens when an atomic bomb explodes. You will know when it comes. We hope it never comes, but we must get ready. It looks something like this. There is a bright flash, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything you've ever seen. If you are not ready and did not know what to do, it could hurt you in different ways. It could knock you down hard or throw you against a tree or a wall. It is such a big explosion, it can smash in buildings and knock signboards over and break windows all over town. But if you duck and cover like Bert, you will be much safer. You know how bad sunburn can feel. The atomic bomb flash could burn you worse than a terrible sunburn, especially where you're not covered. Now, you and I don't have shells to crawl into like Bert the Turtle, so we have to cover up in our own way. First, you duck, and then you cover. And very tightly, you cover the back of your neck and your face. Duck and cover underneath a table or desk or anything else close by. In Betty's school, they are talking about the atomic bomb, too. Betty is asking her teacher, how can we tell when the atomic bomb may explode? and her teacher is explaining that there are two kinds of attack, with warning and without any warning. We think that most of the time we will be warned before the bomb explodes, so there will be time for us to get into our homes, schools, or some other safe place. Our civil defense workers and our men in uniform will do everything they can to warn us before enemy planes can bring a bomb near us. You may be in your schoolyard playing when the signal comes. That signal means to stop whatever you are doing and get to the nearest safe place fast. Always remember, the flash of an atomic bomb can come at any time, no matter where you may be. You might be out playing at home when the warning comes. Then be sure to get into the house fast, where your parents have fixed a safe place for you to go. If you are not close to home when you hear the warning, go to the nearest safe cover. Know where you are to go, or ask an older person to help you. You know the places marked with the S sign? They're safe places to go when you hear the alarm. If there is a warning, you will hear it before the bomb explodes. But sometimes, and this is very, very important, sometimes the bomb might explode without any warning. Then the first thing we would know about it would be the flash. And that means duck and cover fast, wherever you are. There's no time to look around or wait. Be like Bert. When there is a flash, duck and cover, and do it fast. Here are some older boys showing what to do if the flash comes when you are not in the classroom. This is what to do if you should be in a corridor. You duck and cover tight against the wall this way. Remember to keep your face and the back of your neck covered tightly. Try to fall away from windows or doors with glass in them. Then, if the glass breaks and flies through the air, it won't cut you. You might be eating your lunch when the flash comes. Duck and cover under the table. Then, if the explosion makes anything in the room fall down, it can't fall on you. Getting ready means we will all have to be able to take care of ourselves. The bomb might explode when there are no grown-ups near. Paul and Patty know this, and they're always ready to take care of themselves. Here they are on their way to school on a beautiful spring day. But no matter where they go or what they do, they always try to remember what to do if the atom bomb explodes right then. It's a bomb. Duck and cover. Paul and Patty know what to do. Paul covered the back of his head so that he wouldn't be burned, and Patty covered herself with the coat she was carrying. They knew how to duck and cover. They acted right away when the flash came. If they had been at this doorway when the bomb flashed, Paul and Patty would have ducked and covered this way, like this girl. Heavy doorways are a good place to duck and cover. She will be safer, too. Here's Tony going to his Cub Scout meeting. Tony knows the bomb can explode any time of the year, day or night. He is ready for it. Duck and cover. Atta boy, Tony. That flash means act fast. Tony knows that it helps to get to any kind of cover. This wall was close by, so that's where he ducked and covered. Tony knew what to do. Notice how he keeps from moving or from getting up and running? He stays down until he is sure the danger is over. The man helping Tony is a civil defense worker. His job is to help protect us when there is danger of the atomic bomb. We must obey the civil defense worker. We must know how to duck and cover in the school bus or in any other bus or streetcar. Duck and cover. Don't wait. Duck away from the windows fast. The glass may break and fly through the air and cut you. Sundays, holidays, vacation time, we must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes. Duck and cover. This family knows what to do, just as your own family should. They know that even a thin cloth helps protect them. Even a newspaper can save you from a bad burn. But the most important thing of all is to duck and cover yourself, especially where your clothes do not cover you. No matter where we live, in the city or the country, we must be ready all the time for the atomic bomb. Duck and cover. That's the first thing to do, duck and cover. The next important thing to do after that is to stay covered until the danger is over. Yes, we must all get ready now so we know how to save ourselves if the atomic bomb ever explodes near us. If you do not know just what to do, ask your teacher when this film is over. Discuss what you could do in different places if a bomb explodes. Older people will help us as they always do, but there might not be any grown-ups around when the bomb explodes. Then, you're on your own.
Remember what to do, friends. Now tell me right out loud. What are you supposed to do when you see the flash?
Duck.